This story, which we loosely mentioned a little earlier, the veteran jazz teacher fired from a prestigious music school for claiming there is no systemic racial inequality in the UK jazz scene. Speaking exclusively to Talk, Martin Speake, a saxophonist for more than 50 years, alleges he was forced to resign for providing feedback questioning Trinity Laban's diversity policies. In the feedback via email, he claimed he didn't believe black musicians were underrepresented in the UK, but rather have far more opportunities than others. He spoke to Mike Graham earlier today.
I shared it with one student, an interesting student who we always chatted about all kinds of things, and I thought that's what you're supposed to do in the academic world with young adults, talk about interesting subjects. You know, you don't have to agree. And he shared it with half a dozen students, and one of those got anxious. I don't like what Martin's saying here, and went into the head of jazz, who was a friend of mine for 30 years, interestingly, and instead of calling me in, let's all talk about it, bypassed me, and the wheels of motion were set, and the students then heard about the email, although I hadn't seen it, and decided to boycott my lessons.
So there it is. We did reach out to the music and dance school for comment, the Trinity Laban Conservatoire. We contacted them. We await to hear. Let's speak with Ebs Akintade, the broadcaster, who often helps us out on interesting issues such as this. Ebs, how are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you, Ian. Hello, how are you?
Good to have you with us. Well, listen, I mean, it's a curious one, this, because this fellow was asked for his opinion, and he gave his opinion, and when they gave his opinion, they didn't like his opinion, then said, well, you know, makes it rather hard for you to teach now, and nobody turned up to his lectures. What is going on here?
Well, this is one of those things, because of the uber-sensitive times that we're in, as we all know, post-pandemic, post-whatever it is, Trump town coming back in again, we're all so sensitive to other people's points of view. So I know it's interesting to hear that interview with Mike Graham. He sent it to one person, and then it obviously dominoed and spread like some kind of pandemic amongst that year or that class. So then that probably wasn't his original intention, but I do think because of the life and times that we're in, because Trinity Laban is in Greenwich, you know, part of Greater London, we are such a diverse city. We're proud of that, and it's important not to come up with statements like that, because even though there might be his opinions, that kind of strays slightly away from him teaching jazz and saxophone. He's done that for 50 years.
Yeah.
And he's now put his own career in an extreme position now and under scrutiny because of one point of view, because of one email that he sent to one student. You can't do that now. I don't think you can. I think it's all right to have these kind of conversations, maybe on a one-on-one basis, and be mindful of the audience, but to put it in writing.
What was he supposed to do, though? I mean, if you look at, because I think his overarching point, I mean, if you looked at the music industry, certainly music that my kids listen to, or my elder kid, my nearly 11-year-old listens to, which is mostly black, not white. If I look at the sports stars he follows, are mostly black, not white. I mean, but sticking with music, I mean, it's an area that, of all careers of life where there might be big gaps in diversity, you wouldn't certainly initially think that the music industry was one of them. And in fact, you might even argue that there's a sort of over-representation proportionally in many areas of music, and jazz might well be one of them. So he was just merely answering a fact, wasn't he?
Well, no, not exactly. I do think it's a bit of a sweeping statement to say that black musicians were underrepresented. He doesn't think that black musicians are underrepresented in the UK. You know, to say that is too much of a sweeping statement. Unless you've got some kind of a factual analysis behind it, it's really difficult to say statements like that, because you are inevitably going to annoy or put off a certain group of society.
Well, isn't that their fault, not his fault? I mean, if I said to you yesterday, Ebs, you know, do you think black musicians are underrepresented in the UK? What do you think your answer would have, instinctively, without looking into the data, what do you think instinctively your answer would have been?
Genuinely, my answer would have been, I think there's been a period when there has been underrepresentation, but diversity is coming in and things are changing. That would have been my answer. I think underrepresentation is in every single sphere of society in some way, shape or form, whether it's disability, whether it's race, whatever the protected characteristics.
Class is the big one, of course. And
class is the big one.
Doesn't really get much oxygen in these arguments.
But when you're saying that in a classroom, in a well-known school like Trinity Laban, which is in such a diverse city as London, you are running the risk of running through fire and harming your own career by saying that, especially in an email.
Do you think, though, is it possible, though, sorry, Ebs, to talk over you, but I was just going to say, is it possible that Mr. Speake, the man concerned, you know, he's worked here for some time, he knows the students, I'm guessing, and I don't know, but I concur with what you say, Ebs, that given where the school is, it probably has a very mixed group within of students that are there. So he probably felt confident that he could trust people with that view, because it was his own opinion based on what he thought was an intelligent analysis of his experience.
And that's fine, but I think you have to use a certain element of caution, because to say that to a student, even another member of staff, is in an email can be quite a difficult thing to do, because you leave yourself open to all kinds of ramifications, like the students avoiding his class, like his latest album being halted, like having to step down as lead saxophonist at the London Jazz Orchestra. All these things happen as a direct result of just one simple action, which in hindsight, you probably think nothing of it, and 10 years ago you could have done that, but now you cannot.
But that is, I mean, you're right. I mean, he might be sitting there now going, oh, man alive, I wish I hadn't done that because I've lost all my stuff. But ultimately, he should be able to do that. That's the argument, isn't it? He should be able to do that. And anyone that's crying over it should be taken into a room and said, look, you know, we don't want to upset anybody here, but you're a half-wit and he's not. He's right, and because it's his opinion.
Well, yes, that's the point. It's his opinion. It's not a matter-of-fact opinion. It's not even necessarily fact. It's his opinion. So it's anecdotal, but based on his experience, one would assume. Yes, based on his experience, but we can't. We almost have to censor ourselves now. It's not just a case of what we say on social media. You mentioned X earlier and other forms of social media. You've just got to be almost censoring yourself. I know it's not a great thing to say, but just in terms of being cancelled, we live in a cancel culture, and that cancel culture has grown bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And he is now running the high risk of being completely cancelled from not just his job at Trinity Laban, but as a lead saxophonist, and it's going to be tainted by one simple email. I know it's easy to say it now, it's happened, but for future reference for other people, it's probably best to keep your opinions to yourself unless you have hard facts to back it up.
Or should we, you know, as free speech warriors, that I'd like to think you and I are, Ebs, and, yes, you know, dashing young men and all the rest of it that we are, but in addition to that, we advocate free speech. Should that not be the emphasis of these arguments, that we want to overthrow this sort of craziness, this, you know, people wrapped in cotton wool, that they're going to be upset because they disagree with somebody?
Yeah, you mentioned people wrapped up in cotton wool. This Gen Z generation are more sensitive than most, and so they're going to be more reactive than most other people. And due to social media, due to their talent at spreading whatever they see, or video or otherwise, yeah, that was also another reason to not send an email to one person, because inevitably it's going to go to other people. And then the backlash is going to follow, because not everyone follows the same opinion as yourself. So in that case, it's probably best keeping your opinions to yourself and just stick to teaching music. It sounds quite basic and black and white, but if you don't, you do run the risk of harming your own career.
Or do we just put all Gen Zers in jail? There's the answer, Ebs. Then we can start. I don't know how many prisons we'd have to build for that, but it's a nice idea. Listen, Ebs, always good to get your view. Thank you.